So there are people who really like Star Wars and other people who really like Star Trek. Now me, I've always been a passionate Star Wars fan and thought, Star Trek? Screw that. But then I got older and thought,
space, the final frontier. These are the voyages of the Starship Enterprise. Its continuing mission to explore strange new worlds, to seek out new life and new civilizations, to boldly go where no one has gone before.
I do not need to introduce Star Trek The Next Generation, but I am here to count down my picks for the 10 best episodes. Unfortunately for me, I had to pick from a whopping 173 hour-long episodes, some of them ridiculous, others really boring, and others insulting. Yet amongst the ocean of stories, some episodes stand really tall above the waves of mediocrity, ranging from exciting and tense to others that are intriguing and well-written. So, without any more delay, these are my picks for the 10 best episodes of Star Trek The Next Generation.
When you realize someone you love is lost forever.
You know what the worst part of growing old is? So many of the people you've known all your life are gone. And you realize you didn't take the time to appreciate them while you still could.
Great episodes that star Dr. Crusher are something of a rarity in the wide catalog of The Next Generation. And while it's easy to remember the bad ones, there's a gem in Season 4 called Remember Me. Beverly finds herself in an unusual and strange scenario where pockets of reality and memories seem to be vanishing in chunks, leaving only her with the memories of what was originally
You're
there.
telling me I'm the sole medical officer on a ship with over 1,000 people on board.
Excuse me, Doctor, but the entire ship's complement is 230.
What?
Remember Me starts off as standard Trek fare, wherein a single person experiences a bizarre situation and they have to figure out what's going on, but this episode ends up being about more than a simple mystery. Instead, the episode plays out in a deeply psychological manner, immersing the character and audience into Beverly's living nightmare by bringing her deepest phobia, loss, into reality. The result is a paranoid and confusing experience, pulling both character and audience into an eerie scenario where much is lost and forgotten. Yet for all the creepy groundwork that the writers lay, the answer to the mysteries ends up being a little lame, which is why the episode appears at number 10 and not higher, thanks to a weak resolution. However, despite the silly final answer, it doesn't ruin the journey to get there, and the experience that Remember Me offers is vastly underappreciated. While The Next Generation generally kept Vulcans out of the picture, one episode in particular brought them, as well as a classic character, back in style with the legendary Sarek. This episode features Spock's father, an occasional guest star of the original series, coming on board the Enterprise en route to complete a negotiation of great importance. Unfortunately, in his old age, he now suffers from a rare and incurable disease that is destroying his mind's ability to control his emotions. Sarek's telepathic abilities wreak havoc on the ship without his knowledge.
No way! Don't you tell me what to do!
Captain.
As the truth unravels, we find out that his wife and attendants have been protecting him from the disease, and the episode takes a sharp, dark turn as his condition eventually starts to engulf him.
It would be illogical for a Vulcan to surrender! Illogical! Illogical!
This plot is something of a parable for the difficulties that people go through when a family member or loved one suffers from Alzheimer's or dementia, and how it affects the afflicted and those around them. But his diplomatic mission is still extremely important, so Picard willingly melds with Sarek's mind to bear the full brunt of Sarek's emotional crisis, giving us one of Patrick Stewart's most brutal and downright upsetting acting scenes in the series. Sarek is a surprisingly somber episode as it bravely explores the pain that people go through when a family member suffers from mental issues, helping make it one of the strongest and most valuable episodes in the series. But you know what setup we've seen a million times? The Federation attempting to establish diplomatic relations with an alien race. But you know what episode did a really neat job with it? Darmok. The beginning is familiar. The Enterprise is tasked with communicating with an alien race who are difficult to understand. Naturally and amusingly, they fail miserably, hearing the aliens slam them with an onslaught of nonsense. The alien leader decides to beam himself and Picard down to the planet's surface for a little bonding time, and the rest of the episode plays out with Picard desperately trying to understand their bizarre language, with Riker trying to get Picard back. The reason I found this episode so special is how the writers very cleverly created a language that defies translation, as they only speak by citing examples, speaking in parables and emotional states based on their mythology. And when the alien is hurt and dying, he asks Picard to tell him a story from Earth's mythology, and so Picard tells him the legend of Gilgamesh. Gilgamesh was a real man of ancient Sumeria, and is a legend that predates Beowulf and Homer's Odyssey, and he is essentially the first heroic tale of human culture. He was also obsessed with finding the fountain of youth in order to live forever. Of course, he died like any other man, but his name and his legend lives on in many cultures. And Gilgamesh's epic adventures was the last thing the alien heard before he succumbs to his wounds. That is totally awesome. What starts off as a routine diplomatic episode ends with two men, separated tremendously by birth and culture, bonding at fireside over the tales that shape their cultures. To me, this is an incredible expression of peace amongst all men, and the enduring importance of culture and story, making Darmok a memorable and thoughtful episode.
He who was my companion through adventure and hardship is gone forever.
Oh, and everything else resolves eventually. Whatever.
Yeah, well, I told the captain I'd have this analysis done in an hour.
How long would it really take?
An hour?
Oh, you didn't tell him how long it would really take, did you? You've got a lot to learn if you want people to think of you as a miracle worker.
In Relics, the audience is reunited with the legendary Montgomery Scott, and we waste literally no time getting the old colliding with the new, thanks to Scotty being missing for the past 75 years of technological advancements. But don't be too quick to dismiss Relics as nostalgia bait. Scotty's presence is far from a novelty. Instead, it flourishes with its opportunities, spinning its centralized themes on the axis of generational commentary, with fantastic humor peppered throughout.
It is green.
The humor and the bickering of old man Scotty and young man Geordi is amusing and endearing at first, but comedy and nostalgia slowly give way to a sad reality. Scotty has become old and useless in a world wherein he used to thrive. James Doohan gives a great performance as the excitable turned downtrodden man struggling to remain relevant.
To get down to engineering and begin that analysis.
Engineering? I thought you'd never ask.
The torch of technology was passed along without him, making the gaps between Scotty and Geordi and the Federation culture all the more noticeable. It successfully invokes this deliberate old school versus new school discussion, and does so with respect to a classic character. As the episode's focus becomes less and less about the good old days and more on Scotty's loss of relevance, all while giving us just one more dose of what we all love from the veteran actor. And of course, ends on a very optimistic note, with Scotty's clever mind and bold personality saving the day, despite his limitations, and LaForge finally learning to treat him with respect. Relics leaves you with a heartfelt and important examination of the process of aging, respect for the elderly, and the nature of technology. And I admire that. But let's face it, up to a certain point, Worf was a pretty uninteresting character. Interesting that he was a Klingon, sure, but otherwise he didn't bring much to the narrative table.
I have come to challenge the lies that have been spoken of my father.
And that's where Sins of the Father comes in. In this episode, a Klingon officer is transferred aboard the Enterprise. We get some obligatory culture clash scenes with Commander Kurn and the humans, but the episode doesn't spend too much time here, revealing its twist and changing direction early. Turns out Kurn is Worf's long-lost brother.
What a twist!
And their father is being accused of treason on their homeworld. Worf rushes home to defend his honor, and in the process, exposes a web of lies and conspiracy and corruption in the Klingon government. Thanks to Sins of the Father's ambitious quantum leap forward for Klingon culture, we are given a smorgasbord of excellent drama, with episodes like Reunion continuing the story in a heartbreaking way, and the wonderfully epic two-parter Redemption, which is so great it almost made the list by itself. The legacy of Sins of the Father is so strong that it echoed all the way into Deep Space Nine, and Picard certainly shines in these episodes too, standing strongly and faithfully at the side of his friend. If you're looking for the epic launching point on which all of Worf's best moments comes from, then look no further than the arc started in Sins of the Father.
Who is to say that this history is any less proper than the other?
I suppose I am.
Not good enough, damn it! Not good enough!
Yesterday's Enterprise is a really tough episode to do justice to in such a short summary, as it involves a lot of complicated moving parts. Taken in full, it's a complicated and cerebral episode that deals with time travel, alternate universes, and destiny all at the same time. The plot follows Guinan, suddenly thrust into an alternative version of the timeline as we know it, wherein the Federation has now spent years plunged into a terrifying war with the Klingon Empire. Guinan must convince Picard to believe in her version of history and restore the original timeline by sacrificing one of his own officers, none other than Tasha Yar. Though the time travel plotline is the main hook and is incredibly interesting, seeing Tasha Yar back in action and written as a full character is really cool and demonstrates what could have been if Denise Crosby hadn't left so prematurely. The episode ends bittersweetly as Yar faces her destiny with pride and strength, sacrificing herself to save like 20 billion lives or whatever, giving her a far better send-off than what happened in the hot garbage known as Skin of Evil.
But we must help them.
The ethics of sacrifice are explored boldly, making yesterday's Enterprise an enlightening, exciting, intelligently written, and complicated chapter in the Next Generation.
There are 4 lines!
Chain of Command is a really heavy episode. This two-parter sees Picard sent on a mission of espionage against the Cardassians, while the Enterprise is put under the command of a new captain during his absence. Unfortunately, Picard fails his mission and is captured by the Cardassians pretty quickly, but fortunately for us, this sets the stage for what many believe to be Patrick Stewart's finest hour of acting, as he is subjected to the brutal Cardassian interrogation process. Picard is put through physical and mental torture that would drive most insane, and while this episode is often praised for this part of the plot, as well as the portrayal of the Cardassians, I like to compliment the other half of the story as well. Captain Jellicoe's command of the Enterprise is actually disastrous in pretty interesting ways. His style of leadership clashes so hard with what our beloved crew is accustomed to, leaving room for the writers to provide excellent commentary on what it means to be a leader.
Now that the ranks are dropped, Captain, I don't like you either. You don't provide an atmosphere of trust, and you don't inspire these people to go out of their way for you. You've got everybody wound up so tight. There's no joy in anything. I don't think you're a particularly good captain.
Riker's bravado in standing up to Jellicoe, paired with Ronnie Cox's memorable performance, sell a very uncomfortable scenario that many can relate to, and the personal drama happening on the Enterprise is just as interesting to me as Gul Madred's duel of wits and fortitude with Picard. When it's all put together, you have a pair of episodes that are utterly superlative in many, many ways. But, you know, Star Trek was a really tame show until Q, who... While interesting episodes and brief flashes of excitement were peppered here and there, nothing compares to the shock of the Borg's unforgettable introduction. In this episode, the omnipotent trickster Q surprises Picard with a visit and taunts him for being ill-prepared for the true dangers of the universe.
Oh, the arrogance. They don't have a clue as to what's out here.
When Picard defends himself and his crew's honor, Q hurls the Enterprise thousands of light years away to come face to face with a mysterious threat, whom Guinan calls the Borg. It doesn't take long for the Borg to infiltrate and overwhelm the Enterprise, and it also doesn't take long to make clear that the Enterprise is but an insect to their race's technology, and are outmatched in every way. In Star Trek, it's fairly typical for characters to be hyper-competent and able to adapt to any scenario. But here, the writers came up with a villain so thoroughly superior that Picard has no choice but to flee for their lives with impending doom nipping at their feet, and Q continually taunting Picard, who has no choice but to admit that he's learned their lesson. Q Who raises the dramatic stakes of the series by a significant margin, with an episode that leaves the audience and the crew shocked and humbled. It employs excellent mystery, features some really great music, and strums up enough terror to make it stand among the greatest episodes that the franchise has to offer, and helps set the stage for many great stories to come.
Maybe Q did the right thing for the wrong reason.
But you know, there's an episode out there that's like the total opposite of everything I just said.
I am the culmination of one man's dream. But when Dr. Sung created me, he added to the substance of the universe. If by your experiments I am destroyed, something unique, something wonderful will be lost.
Exciting is the last word that can be used to describe Measure of a Man, but what Q Who did to raise the dramatic stakes, Measure of a Man did for the philosophical. This episode sees a young scientist come aboard the Enterprise, seeking to dismantle Data so that he can be studied and copied, but Picard steps up to claim that Data is not an object to be bargained with, but a real being capable of making choices. When the young scientist gets an admiral involved, the entire issue is taken to trial. The rest of the episode is an incredibly well-written focus study that dives deeply and, I think, bravely into what does or does not constitute real and artificial life, and whether artificial life should be protected and treated with respect and dignity, and the debate rages over the authenticity of Data's sentience. There are a lot of real-life parallels in their debates, most obviously in regards to slavery, but Data's right to choose his life covers a large spectrum of social issues. The episode's script unloads a torrent of legitimate challenges to both sides, with Picard's passionate plea for Data's rights taking the focus. Coming off of the first season of The Next Generation, I feel this provided a much-needed boost in maturation and tone, thanks to the writers trying their hand with a complicated issue that doesn't have a conclusive answer. And while it's the last episode I think of in regards to excitement, it is instead a masterwork in Star Trek's greatest capacity for the philosophical, with a mentally engaging and superbly tight discussion on seeking out new life that may be closer to life imitating art than we think. But before we get to number one, here are some honorable mentions.
Pity you had to change.
The pity is that I had to be impaled through the back before I learned that lesson.
Then I take it you challenge my authority over you.
Correct.
All hands abandon ship! Repeat! All hands abandon...
Before I had the opportunity to watch the episode that I selected for number one, I happen to have read that it is widely considered a candidate for the greatest episode in the entire franchise, so I was expecting something truly great. And you know what?
I am Locutus of Borg.
I wasn't disappointed. Best of Both Worlds is simply the best of what Star Trek is capable of in a dramatic sense. The plot involves a dreaded Borg cube barreling towards Earth, causing the Federation to rally every ship to answer the call, with the Enterprise getting there first to stall them. Unfortunately, this plays right into the Borg's hands, kidnapping Captain Picard and assimilating him, thereby granting the Borg intimate knowledge of how to destroy the Federation. Everything oozes cinematic tension and an imposing sense of urgency, accented by an epic and chilling musical score. It's an absolute blast to watch, utilizing tragic and exciting scenarios and excellent character writing and dynamics. And even though the entire crew gets the chance to shine, it's Captain Riker who completely steals the show, employing keen military strategy to help win the day and bring back Picard. And Patrick Stewart himself has claimed that the humanization of Picard in these episodes was a stroke of brilliance, bringing the perfect man down to a place of vulnerability. It demonstrates that Star Trek is capable of providing their signature cerebral storytelling while keeping the action going and the characters moving forward. There is a damn good reason it's so commonly and widely recognized, and it is my pick for the best episode of The Next Generation. So what did you think of the list? Did you agree or disagree with any of my selections? Are you salty because Inner Light didn't even make it on? Let me know in the comments. Thanks for being a nerd with me, and I'll see you next time.